Hello everyone, this is FIDE Master Viktor Neustroyev, and today we are going to talk about Alireza Firouzja. This webinar is called Play Like Alireza Firouzja. Well, if you open a FIDE website, you probably find that this is the strongest player among youngsters. So let me show you. So look at the screen. So we see the list. So Magnus Carlsen is number one among we can be conducted from there. So that's why this is absolutely empty. I just need to take all this equipment and move to my other apartment, a new one apartment that I moved. So just to remind you, I'm still in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So if you want to meet in person, just message me anywhere. At least you can message me at tricksofchess@gmail.com and we can schedule a meeting, play some chess, or just analyze some games or discuss chess. Okay, so yeah, let's check if everything is working. In my opinion, it does, but I'm not sure about the quality of the sound. It also works on Twitch. I'm doing a stream on Twitch as well. Okay. It is better now. Okay, perfect. Well, I don't know because I don't know what's the problem because it says that the quality of my connection is good. Maybe there was a problem. But well, yeah, there is a kind of a problem with the sound. It will be echo, as I told you, and the echo is because this apartment is absolutely empty. Okay, fine. Looks like everything works. Here, everything works too. So YouTube and Twitch are working both. Okay, fine. So what are we going to talk about today? We are going to analyze the games of Alireza Firouzja. Actually, people pronounce his name in a different way. So his name is Alireza. This is where everyone agrees. But his family name sounds in a different way, depends on the country. So he is French. It should be something like Firouzja. Firouzja. Well, people also say Firouzja. So I'm going to say Firouzja because I got used to pronounce like that. Russian people say Alireza Firouzja, something like that, but let's say Firouzja. He was born in Iran and he was originally a chess player from Iran, but because of some restrictions for sportsmen in Iran, he decided to move to France and change his chess federation. Now he is representing France. Okay, so what are we going to talk about? First of all, I'm going to demonstrate 3 or 4 of his games, depends on how much time do we spend on them, played in blitz, because Alireza Firouzja is one of the best blitz players too. And from this webinar, we are not only going to learn how he plays, but we will try to improve our ability to play blitz. So I'm actually quite bad at blitz. So if you see that sometimes in the tournaments my performance can be 23 or 2400 and my rating is now 2285, so quite close to 2300, I play blitz at least 200 lower, so 2100 maybe 2200 sometimes. Okay, so and I want to learn it myself. So this time we're learning from the games of Alireza Firouzja. This is the game he was playing against another strong player. It was a tournament on chess.com. They played online. He was playing against Bogdan Belikov. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop B5. So knight F6, we have Berlin wall, D3, anti-Berlin, bishop C5, and this is where white decides to take, which is quite common. Well, the pawn on e5 is of course poisoned because of several reasons. So first of all, this move is playable. e5 your black I would capture and then continue with queen d4 and then take this knight. However, I still think that playing queen d4 is a good idea because after bishop e3, well, if you take the knight, you get d4. So I think it's unlikely to work. However, maybe, because bishop takes, queen takes e4, so why not? You are still a pawn up. Why not? But you can also, instead of taking this knight, you can also take on b2. Bishop c5, queen takes e1, you have extra exchange. White has some compensation, but it seems that black is better. So the pawn is poisoned. You cannot take it. Instead, h3 was played. h3, so knight d7, knight c3, castle, bishop e3, and the bishops can be exchanged, which I actually think would favor black. So if I were black, I would exchange. However, the f file is now open, and potentially it can be some pressure on f7 as well as such a maneuver like knight h4, knight f5. Well, if there was a bishop on c4, I would say yes, it's a good idea, but in this position, it doesn't seem like white achieved something with this exchange. However, at the same time, what can we say? What black gonna do? Because black cannot play f5, it ruins their pawn structure. They have double pawns there, and these 4 against 3 on the queen side. 1 to 3. Okay, so the sound should be working. Please confirm. Thanks for letting me know, because, well, I sometimes don't see that everything is working. Well, I didn't say anything. I was asking for the plan for white and for black. Well, yes, it definitely was safer for white to castle to the king side, but this is blitz. And if you want to succeed in blitz, you should provoke your opponent to make a mistake. Or at least to think more and spend more time, and then make a mistake during the complications that you both gonna face with. So did I say anything about the support of d4? Well, I don't remember, but okay, let's just focus on this position. So let's go back. So this castle, and what should black do? What is your plan? So first for black, then for white. Or maybe you are very common with such type of the positions and you know exactly how to deal with it, how to play such positions. Well, as for me, I definitely know what both players should do in this position. So what we typically do with opposite, with the king's castle to the opposite flanks. Black should start the pawn march on the queen side. Exactly. That's why the best move for black is b5 here. And white should start the pawn march on the king side with g4. So for example, a5, and at least these pawns look really dangerous for white, and these moves are coming. So white at least should pay attention to what's going on the queen side, but not only follow their plan, not only advance the pawns on the king side. In the game, instead of doing this logical thing, Bogdan Belikov decided to play c5. He got h4, and then he played b6. And you see, well, with c5, he wanted to control this square. And the idea of this move is to play this slow plan, which requires 3 tempi, and at the same time allows white to achieve a lot on the king side. And the pawns are not on the 5th rank, so the c pawn cannot go further, so the a and the b pawn should be there in order to attack. So looks like he chose a wrong plan. So b5 looks good, and this slow plan looks too passive. h5, knight b8, rook d to g1, because white wants to play g4, of course. Knight c6, and g4 is played. Knight comes to d4. Well, taken with the knight is a blunder. Taken with the bishop is possible, but then we don't know where to move this knight. So, for example, if we take and then play there, after c6, we don't know where this knight goes, because it has no squares available. And if instead we go to d1, then the knight is bad again, so probably b1 and then knight d2, but it doesn't look good here. So that's why here Alireza Firouzja just played queen d1. What happened then? Queen d6, another slow move with no reason. Instead, again, b5. With b4 idea, this is what should be done. So g5, let's say, b4, knight goes to b1, and then some actions are required from black. So a5 and this move seems to be very slow, because g6 is the next move of white, which will definitely open the file. the G file, and the G7 becomes vulnerable. Instead of that, black should take immediate actions on the queen side. And my question for you is, which exact actions I'm talking about? So which actions black should play in order to prevent so strong pawn march on the queen side? Or maybe not to prevent, but to face. Oh, Peter asks why the queen went there, not there. Well, the queen is defending the knight. So guys, I'm looking for your suggestions. Bishop e6. So bishop e6, but well, okay, Peter suggests, okay, no. Well, bishop e6, just g6. Okay, what else do we have? Bishop e6 or rook b8. Well, but I'm talking about the king side, so black should defend the king side. Did I say queen side? So yeah, black should defend the king side instead of the queen side, in order to prevent this activity, which looks really dangerous. Ideally, the pawns should be closed, or at least the black pieces should defend the king, and this defense should be enough. So rook e6, g6. Well, g6 looks really interesting, but after that, if h takes, then just this and this. Well, let's be more accurate and not blunder the knight on f3. So, but just doubling the rooks on the h file wins, anything wins. So f takes g6 is a must, but then looks like h7 is vulnerable. For example, rook h4 and then this. Well, yeah, g6 is a possible way, but the best way was f5. F5, en passant, and then queen takes f6. And the queen comes closer, the rook may come closer, and the f3 knight is hanging, so which means that white has to decide whether to take on d4 or to do something with the knight. And with the queen already being here on the king side, this attack doesn't look so dangerous as it was before. White is still going to continue this attack, but anyway, it's much better than such a move like queen d6, which was played in the game. So b5 was the best way. And actually, if you think that you can capture the pawn here, no, you cannot, because the attack looks, well, it's just, the game is just over, because what? Knight a3, bishop takes, pawn takes, queen d6, now queen takes a3, and white is too slow with their attack, while their king is already in huge trouble. So b5, then g5, and the game would continue with some advantage for white. In the game, it was queen d6, g5, bishop e6. This is what I want you to learn. So looks like all the moves that white played, they played in seconds, because they didn't have to take any responsible decisions. For example, what? Well, not exchanging on d4. Well, it was obvious because they can exchange on d4 anytime they want. So they'd better wait for a better moment. Castle queen side. Well, it was definitely a possible strategy. And then they just moved the pawns on the king side, move the rooks there to open the attack. And now they have to take a responsible decision by the first glance, but a very logical move if you already experience with opposite side castling positions. It's g6, opening the file, not h6, which allows them to play g6, and now you can only benefit of the weakness of these two squares. If this diagonal was open, I would say yes, h6 is also a possibility, but in this position you cannot take advantage. So even if you do like that, at the very worst scenario, they take on f6 with the bishop. So g6, you should open, and you should exchange one of the pawns. h6 was a better suggestion. Then g takes f7, bishop takes f7, and after knight h4, the pawn is protected, knight goes to g6, and the attack continues. In the game, instead, f takes g6 was played, h takes g6, and h6, which looks quite natural. But black are missing something here. What do you think? How would you continue the white's attack here? So I'm waiting for your suggestions. Knight h4 to knight f5. Well, it still looks good, but after knight f5 they can take with the knight. So you have to maybe take on d4 first, but then your knight on c3 is hanging. Where would you like to get this knight to? Let's decide. Oh, bishop h6. John suggests bishop h6. So, John, can you please explain the idea? Are you going to play g7 here or what? g7, bishop g7, because I don't see the full compensation here. So, take. This is a pin. How do they play? Maybe queen f8 to threaten here. Then you can take on d4, so c takes d4, queen h5, threatening the mate, right? So how to defend? Oh, queen f4 check. King goes to b1, of course. So if this check, the king doesn't escape. Okay, clear. Okay, then king f8 right away. So if you check, I take, or maybe I just block on g8. So you have to take there, threatening with a checkmate, right? So then I can, I have to take rook rook g6 is check. Well, rook h7 check, for example. This move, and this is a mate. Nice. Oops. Queen h6 is a blunder because of the queen on f4. So king f8, rook h8, king e7, and the king escapes here. But another suggestion is to play rook g6 or queen g6. Yeah, queen g6. This. Then it escapes, the king escapes. So this is the move. Threatening with queen g7 mate. But again, just something like queen g4 is enough. No, it's not. Okay, let's go back. So yeah, this is a winning position actually. If knight d4, then queen f4, queen h6. So you have to play knight d2 instead. Queen f2. And if you do this move, you just blunder this rook. Yeah, I think black survives in this position. It should be okay. Okay, no, it's not bishop h6. Well, you see, this is a blitz game. Bishop h6 is a very responsible move because this is how we give up a piece. And we don't see that we checkmate after that in a few moves. The position becomes unclear with potential pressure. Such a move, bishop h6, can be played in case if your opponent is low on time. Because he then has to calculate before decide whether he accepts or not this sacrifice, and while he is calculating, he's spending time. And later, when he when in the middle of this combination, when he's low on time and he's still forced to find the only moves, he will definitely experience problems with finding them and will make a mistake which you will take advantage of. So when he is low on time, you can do this, which provokes him to calculate. Another suggestion is that when your opponent is low on time, lower than you, of course, then you should keep the position more complicated, where he has to calculate the line. So, for example, exchanging pieces doesn't make sense. Initiating the attack by sacrificing something makes sense, but exchanging pieces just for nothing doesn't. Okay. So Barry Phillips suggests a very nice move. Okay, this move was also suggested by Saovska Sija. I'm not sorry if I didn't pronounce it properly. It's knight g5, right? This is also a piece sacrifice, but this piece sacrifice is really obvious. H takes g5 doesn't require any calculation. It's easy that the game ends with this simple mate. I'll show you. So g5, knight g5, pawn takes. It's a check, attracting the king, and then this is a checkmate. It's really easy to find. That's why here, instead of taking, they should play something else. And the knight goes to f7, which will force the enemy king to go away. And then h6, bishop h6 becomes more natural because it opens the king. So they played c6. I don't know what for, maybe to control the d5 square. Queen to h5. So knight g5 was not only to take or to go to f7, but also to bring the queen into the attack. Rook e7 and knight f7 on the next move. So if now, for example, bishop f7, g takes f7, rook takes f7, it's bishop h6. The pawn was sacrificed. With bishop h6, the pawn was won back. Now this is a threat because queen h7 can lead to a checkmate. So knight f7 instead, black decided to sacrifice the exchange, but after this move they wanted to play this. And they thought that after queen h6 they are not in the trouble because queen takes queen. And at least there is no checkmate, the game may continue. However, after rook takes f7, white decided to play another move. Which move I'm talking about? Can you please find it? So who can tell me what's the answer? Queen takes h6. Well, Brian, you're kidding me. So queen h6, g takes h6, g takes f7. How do you checkmate here? And what if actually the king takes on f7? So this time I don't need to go to h7, I can just take the pawn. No, queen h6 doesn't work. Of course, you shouldn't sacrifice if you are not sure that this move works. So first of all, when you play the game, you want this game to be a winning game for you. And you also want this game to be the game with almost no or fewer mistakes. And the last thing you want is to make this game a nice game, so with brilliant combinations. It's really nice if you end with a brilliant combination and win the game because of these tactics. But this is not your goal in chess if you want to succeed. If you want to produce a piece of art, then yes, look for such sacrifices, and maybe at a certain moment of your chess career you become Mikhail Tal. Well, in my opinion, this is definitely not the best way to play chess and not the best way to improve. Because sacrifice may works against people against lower rated player, but when you meet someone really strong, he will definitely refute this sacrifice. Okay, bishop takes h6. So bishop takes h6 is the answer. This is the move. Yes, thank you guys for suggesting me. This is the move that solves all the problems. After that, black resigned. So let's decide why they resigned. So first of all, this is a threat. Even just any bishop move is a threat because of queen h8 and queen h7 is a mate. So that means that they have to accept this sacrifice. For example, g takes h6, g takes f7, it's a double check and the pawn is protected, so the king has to move. If the king moves there, it's a checkmate in 2. If the king goes to h8, it's a checkmate with in 2 with either this or a queen sacrifice like Brian wanted, like that. So the game was over, and let's make a conclusion. So why Alireza Firouzja won this game, having in mind that that was a blitz game? He chose the opening, which was quite familiar for him, with a clear plan of what white can do. Black, for some reason, couldn't come up with a proper plan, and instead of doing the same strategy on the other flank, decided to improve their pieces. Actually, yes, I must agree that this knight on d7 is really bad and cannot be improved. So the knight wants to black still lost another temper, and after g5 and g6, so these are the moves he played automatically because he knows the opening well and he knows typical plans, and because black didn't create any danger, he was just following this logical plan. So if you wanna win blitz games as Alireza Firouzja does, you should play the opening that you are familiar with, not only the opening, but the strategy that you gonna apply after, let's say, the pieces are developed and the kings are castled. After the first maybe 12 moves, you have to decide which plan you follow. So you should be familiar with the plans that you should be looking for in the opening you play. And then choose one of them, depends on how your opponent plays. And starting after that, when black consumed a lot of time for finding such moves like c5, knight b8, queen d6, b6, they at that moment already were experiencing a lack of time, and that's why after g6 they have to solve the problems over the board with just a few minutes left, and that's why this is where they were provoked to make such a mistake. And here I think they just didn't expect knight g5. But this knight sacrifice is really obvious, even for a 1500 rated player. And then the plan is obvious. So after g6 and h6, this is the first move that Alireza Firouzja made spending a few seconds. Maybe he spent these seconds while his opponent was thinking and was preparing to make h6 move. But this is where white should think of what should they do in order to succeed. So only at move number 19. And the black's position is already worse. So you see, black lost because they spent too much time, and later because of that they were provoked to make a mistake, and because of the other reason, because they were playing too slowly in the opposite side castling positions, where their plan was to perform a pawn march on the queen side. Let's take a look at the second game that I prepared for today. This time Alireza Firouzja was playing against Almira Skripchenko. Well, I remember in 90s, Almira Skripchenko was one of the best female players in the world. Now she's definitely not, but at least she is at least strong grandmaster. So let's continue. Knight f3, g6. Again, the opening that doesn't require any knowledge. All these moves can be played automatically. So it's Philidor with the pawn on c3. Now castle h3. Why h3? This move is definitely not required. But making such a move, which may be helpful or maybe not, forces black to think and come up with a plan that they should initiate here. So, and while black is trying to find the plan, white is also trying to come up with their plan. e5. Well, it's quite logical. This is what chess players should do in Philidor. Rook e1, another logical move. So the rook goes to the file that is going to get open. So such move like rook e8 would deserve attention and would be probably the best option, but instead black continues with knight h5. Who can tell me what's the point of knight h5? I'm sure Brian knows. So Peter asks if this grandmaster Alireza Firouzja is number 2 in the world. No, he is number 5 in the world. And Ding and Nepper are ahead of him. So Carlson is number 1, Fabiana Caruana is number 2. Oh, Ding Liren is number 3, and Hikaru Nakamura is the 4th. So Alireza Firouzja is the 5th, and Nipor is the 6th. So, but of course, we remember that Nipor was the 2nd or the 3rd when he played the match against Ding Liren. Well, Ding Liren is not playing nowadays. He has a kind of a disease that he wants to recover from, and then he promised to continue his chess career. So yeah, knight h5 is played with the idea to play f5, which is not, which doesn't work in this position, but it also has the idea of playing knight f4. So guys, if for some reason this YouTube stream doesn't work well for you, you can switch to Twitch and subscribe to my and follow my Twitch. So this is the link, because I sometimes get mistakes that I'm streaming this video too slow on YouTube. However, everything works perfectly well on Twitch. And this new apartment that I moved to, that I've already moved to yesterday, where I'm going to conduct our new streams, is much better, and I think the internet connection is also much better there. I was able to test it today, and it says, well, the speed is 700 megabits per second. Well, I don't understand how is it possible, because the maximum that I was able to achieve was 100. But let's see. So okay, so we are talking about knight h5. Knight goes to f4. Well, knight a3. Do not block the bishop, because if knight goes to f4, we would love to take on f4. We cannot tolerate this very annoying knight. What about f5 in this position? So let's say take, and f5 plan was a mistake because of what? Who can tell me? Well, knight takes e5 is the most logical continuation, of course. So knight takes e5, what then? Can the knight take? If pawn takes, it's queen h5 and looks good. So yeah, knight takes e5 is one of the possibilities, but it's definitely not the best move. Can you suggest anything better than this? Come on, guys, I'm sure you can find it. Can deliver a check. Yes, you can deliver a check. But what's the point of doing this check? Knight g5. Thank you, Barry. It's definitely knight g5 with a threat of a fork on e6, bishop c4, and knight to f7, as well as queen h5. Thank you. Well, bishop c4, knight g5 also looks good, but I think knight g5 right now is enough. Okay, so f5 doesn't work, and black chooses the second option to play knight f4. Bishop takes, pawn takes, queen d2, attacking the pawn, but g5. Well, what white should do? Nobody knows. That's why white just plays a move which is helpful in case if the position gets open. So they play rook a d1. h6. And what now? Looks like white pieces are better concentrated in the center. So we will say white is consolidated here. Only the knight is on the edge of the board, so the knight can join here or maybe to b5 in some situations. But I think knight c4 is the main move. However, what would you suggest for white? How white can already convert their better development or better consolidation in the center? What would you do, in other words? Yes, it's e5. So, in other words, if you are better concentrated and well, you see a better interaction among your pieces, or you're better developed, you should open the position with e5. So they decided to take. However, instead they could try to activate their pieces, like knight c4, knight f8, then maybe a4 to stop b5, then d5, knight goes to a5, the bishop cannot get developed, and if b6 is played, the knight goes to b4, pressuring this. So for example, queen d7, knight b4 with this idea, bishop b5. It looks good anyway, but rook e8 was the best move. Instead, it was d takes e5, but you can also tell me, well, what if they keep the position closed like that? What do you think? So in such a case, this simple strategy could make sense. The diagonal is open, so white simply takes advantage of it. And later also considers this option. c4 taken on d5, and if c6, then c takes d5, c takes d5, and this knight goes to d6. Anyway, d takes e5. D takes e5, queen e7, e6. Now what? Well, if the pawn takes, it's obviously this move. And the queen takes, it's this. If the queen goes somewhere else, then rook d1, knight goes to create a discovered attack, and simply rook g6. And now there is a pin here. So how to play? Let's say bishop f5, right? Bishop f5. How would you play in this position? Who can tell me? There is something that I also want you to know, to pay more attention to. So what do you think? There is a very nice move that you can play. But you have to notice something. Well, black played bishop f5. So what white can do? Come on, guys. I'm sure you can find it. Rook f5 by Barry. Well, rook f5 makes sense actually. Nice, nice. So rook f5 is a really clever move. Then knight d5, and you can take, and then bishop c4. So, but the best option instead of rook f5 after bishop f5 is b4. So the queen is trapped. If the queen goes there, it's still bishop c4. And if knight takes c4, queen takes d5 check. Okay, good. So e6, and if they take on e6, they would lose the game. So knight b6, and e takes f7. Queen takes f7, and in this position, again, if I were white, I would try to do something like that. Either bishop c2, queen d3, threatening the mate, or bishop here, bishop to b3, trying to take advantage of this pin. But white played knight e5. So what white is doing now? White consolidated their pieces in the center, so the pieces are better coordinated, and now white is creating threats. And these, well, they are unlikely to move the queen because there are a lot of weak squares into the enemy territory. So let's say the queen moves, it can be this, and then queen d3 with a mate. Or it can be just knight c4, knight takes, bishop takes with a check, and some serious complications. Or it can be knight g6, knight e7 check with other complications. Or it can be knight g6, rook e7. So a lot of threats, so they have to take. Rook takes, and they would still continue playing this game if here they just get more pieces involved with bishop d7. So bishop c2, queen g7 defending against this, rook d1, rook a8, bishop b3, king moves, and this is a playable position. White is definitely better, but not really much. Instead, black also tried to play for a win and initiated a counterattack with f3. Such a counterattack would work if the white player, would be weaker than the black player. Probably he would be afraid of this strong attack, but not Alireza Firouzja. After this move, actually, it's easy to win the game for white. So white played bishop c2. Well, you may think that, okay, well, wait a sec. If we take, they take, we can play rook g5, right? Because this is a winning position. If let's say what? Well, if this move, then probably rook g3 or rook g6 works. If they take, it's gonna be a mate. So if king goes there, it's a mate. If the king goes there, then it's bishop g6. Am I right? So Yeah, probably I am. So because the king cannot go there, at least they lose the queen. And they have to go to e6 only. But then it's a check. The king has to go to d7 or here. Or to where? d6. If he goes to d6, we can bring the knight. Well, but let's say, okay, if they play, doesn't matter where they go, we can do this move. They go there, and we can at least play bishop f4. But I think there is a checkmate. There should be a checkmate, like this, this, and this. Nice. If they go there, then it's even easier. King c6, and okay, no, it's not easier. Then you have to play bishop e4 and win the queen. So yeah, it looks nice. But the point is that the idea of f3 was not to take on f3, but to take on h3. And now rook g5 no longer works. Queen g7 and the queens should be exchanged. So that's why bishop c2 instead of g takes f3. They take, and after this move, the game is over. Well, this is where black resigned. But let's say, what if they played king h8? So instead of taking, they play king h8. How would we continue? What can you say? The king is really exposed, even with the queen being defending it. What do you think? How white can play here? So waiting for your suggestion, guys. Queen d4. Thank you, John. Yes, it's definitely queen d4 creating the discovered attack. And even if they do this, the position is completely winning after rook e7. Queen takes d4, rook takes d4. This pawn is lost. If they take here, nobody cares. The king is in trouble, so rook h7, rook h6 is coming. So it's just a completely losing game. That's it. So if the previous game was won because of the properly chosen opening, where white understood, where white know which exact plan to initiate, this game was played mainly because of the mistakes of black. So white used a kind of a waiting strategy. You see, this pawn move is kind of a useless move. Well, sometimes it can be helpful, but if black plays properly, this is a useless move. And probably black could get close to a draw position with rook e8, close to equal position with rook e8. That would be the best strategy for black, and well, who knows, maybe they would play positionally for 30 moves more, and then they passed the game into approximately equal endgame and then drew. But black also tried to play for a win and chose this move, which by the first glance was considered to be a good idea. However, f5 is not a possibility, and after knight f4 it's bishop f4. And in order to defend this pawn, they had to open the diagonal. And finally, well, white didn't know how to exploit it at the moment. But finally, when white realized that they brought all their pieces into the game except this knight, they just opened the position, and because of the weakness of light squares, because of their better pieces coordination in the center, they were able to defeat their opponent. So that's the reason. So what I want to say, Firouzja was making kind of waiting moves which helped him to get his pieces potentially active in case if the position gets open. He was waiting for black mistakes or for black plan, so he adapts his strategy according to what black does. Black didn't do their best. They played a very suspicious plan, and white was able to refute it by opening the position, by exchanging the bishop for the knight first and then opening the position. Okay, so that this is what I want to say. So that's why such a pawn move like h3 and such a move like rook e1, which doesn't do anything, may be helpful when you're playing blitz. So it's just a waiting move. This move is definitely not bad. Maybe it's not good, but it's definitely not bad. And this move may become helpful. Another important thing is that you don't spend any seconds. You play these moves automatically. Okay, there is a good question by Santosh Raj. How to develop pieces in a normal game? Well, try to, well, what I always tell my students, try to control the center with your pawns or occupy the center with your pawns. Try to develop your minor pieces to the positions where you think they will be able to coordinate them on each other. Try to castle the king, don't forget about it, and do not waste tempi. So do not play with pawns many times in a row in the very beginning of the game. Do not play with the same piece twice or three times if it's not required. And that's it. So just these basic principles, and at least you will be able to get approximately equal position after the first 10 moves, where you can at least come up with a plan. Okay, fine. So what else do we have? We have one more game to analyze today. This is the game between where Alireza Firouzja was playing against Vasily Ivanchuk. So Vasily Ivanchuk is a legend. I remember his game against Kasparov. Well, nowadays he's older. Maybe his best years have already passed, but he is still a strong chess player. Let me check where he is. What is his current position? Well, I cannot find. Oh, Vasily Ivanchuk, number 85. Okay, fine. So let's continue. The game that he played, that Alireza Firouzja was playing against Vasily Ivanchuk. So this game is important for us because both players are approximately of the same level. If in two previous games White was Alireza was much better than his opponents, this time Ivanchuk can be also a good blitz player and can definitely outplay Alireza Firouzja in some games. Not if they play the match. For example, if they play a match, I'm sure Alireza Firouzja would win. If it is the match of 10 games, I would think the score would be 7-3 in Firouzja's favor. But in a certain game, if Vasily Ivanchuk is in a good condition, he can definitely defeat almost everyone. So d4, knight f6, and Trompovsky attack with bishop g5. e6, e4. How well, white tries to get the control over the center, but c5, e5, h6. No, not bishop h4, because then g5, and then after this move, the bishop is out of the game. And if take, then this pawn is lost, but this is not. So black is going to end with a bishop pair, which they will try later to take advantage of, and they also gain a pawn here. So I don't think that queen f3 works. At least you can take on d4. You can play also these moves and take on f6 anyway. So that's why bishop c1. This move also defends the b2. That's why not bishop a3, not bishop d2, but bishop c1 to defend the pawn. Knight goes to h7. d5, d6. This is the theoretical position. Well, then knight c3 was played. E takes d5, queen takes d5, knight c6, bishop b5, queen c7. So this is the theory, and this position is considered to be fine for black. It's approximately equal. White control the center, but looks like now they have to lose their positions. They have to retreat the queen back, and they have to exchange. After which maybe black pieces would be a little bit more active. Well, when there is a pawn on d5 attacking e6, it makes sense to continue with bishop b5. And after bishop d7, take here, and then take on f7, or at least provoke them to take with the f-pawn. Here, the main problem is that the bishop is hanging, and this move, e takes f7, doesn't offer anything, even after queen h5. You see? So this here. Well, I think they have to play this move right away. So maybe this move here, here, and after queen b7, bishop c6, and black is completely fine. Well, queen b3, d5. Okay, so bishop b5 doesn't work, but it definitely works after knight c3, because the knight will be protecting this bishop. a6, knight f3, and e takes d5 still could make sense, but in the game it was d takes a5, knight takes a5, and knight f6. So what did happen to the position? They played a very rare opening, and looks like black didn't know how to play it. Alireza Firouzja understood it, and instead of just playing slow moves, waiting moves, or some pawn moves, he made the position complicated, because in a complicated position, any player can make a mistake. So this is what they both don't know, and they both have to think. And he continues with bishop c4, creating threats. So he created a complicated position with the opening that he chose. He understood that Vasily Ivanchuk is not so familiar with this opening, and especially doesn't remember how to play it. Well, especially cannot recall it with a lack of time. And that's why making some threats could make sense, that would provoke Ivanchuk to spend more time and to experience time trouble issues later. So what now? Well, who can tell me why b5 doesn't work in this position? Well, okay, Peter, I'm going to answer your questions regarding the development later, but I think you can compare it yourself. So black played a few times with the knight, and white also played a few times with the bishop, getting the bishop back to c1. Okay. Yeah, I definitely understand what you are talking about. So guys, while I'm waiting for your suggestions, let me just quickly go back to this moment. So h6. So the knight goes 2 times, but the bishop goes 2 times too. So this, and then finally the knight goes back. So the knight made 1, 2, 3 moves. The bishop made 1, 2 moves, and it's still not developed. So it's gonna make the third move. That means it's equal for both. Both spent 3 tempi. Both would spend 3 tempi to develop the bishop or to develop this knight. So bishop c4, and this is the position we are analyzing. So guys, what do you think? Okay, so no suggestions. Well, b5 doesn't work because of d takes d6. What now? Well, right now they cannot take because it's easy. So you take there, and after king e7, you just chase the king away from the queen, and you take the queen for free. But if they exchange the queens first, and then they take on c4, then check, and if the king goes there, it's a fork. If the king goes there, it's still a fork, but this time to a bishop and the rook. So rook h7, knight f8, and white wins. So they are also about to do this, and then f8 equals queen. That's why such a move like b5 cannot be played. Instead, something else should be played, and this move was played. Well, this is where they both had to calculate, and by doing threats and by having more sharp position, white was able to find this move. Well, taken with the bishop or taken with the pawn would be good. Well, for example, bishop takes, bishop, pawn takes, the knight retreats somewhere, bishop c7, queen takes queen, and this in game is more favorable for white, but, well, because of the weakness on e6. But anyway, it's still playable for black at any level. Instead, it was bishop e5, so a sacrifice. What do you think? Why accepting this sacrifice isn't a good idea? With this bishop takes e5, black ruins their opposition, but doesn't win a piece, as Ivanchuk thought. So he thought that this is a sound sacrifice, and he can capture it and then hold the position and defend against the white's threat, and then end up with extra material in the end game. This is an ideal scenario for black, but it's unlikely to happen, and it's actually quite obvious why. E takes f7. If the king goes to f8, it's just a blunder and a mate. So king goes to e7, but after queen e2, there is a pin that white simply exploits. So knight c6, and they do f4, undermining the bishop. Well, it could make sense to play bishop f4 with the same idea. Because if queen d6, for example, rook d1. Queen c7, you can play rook d5, let's say. And if queen c7 right now to defend, just castle queenside and then rook a to e1, so they just cannot do anything to avoid these problems. So f4, the piece is not won. Bishop g4, queen e3, queen d4, f takes e5. If the queen takes here, e takes f6. And I think it's a losing position. It's a double check, so the king has to take. Then castle is illegal because of the queen. And then rook f1. King goes there. How to play this position? Maybe rook f4 is enough, right? Yeah, I think rook f4 is enough. So this move, then take this move, and then this move with h3. So queen e5, for example, this move, because rook e8 cannot be played. Okay, fine. So yeah, this is a completely winning position. That's why knight takes e5 instead. Knight takes d5. And here, the best way for black was just to take the pawn. There was no good discovered attack because this bishop is always hanging. For example, queen takes, queen pawn takes, and if you, let's say, continue with this move, you simply lose here, and you have no time to take on e8. This is how white gonna lose two minor pieces for a rook. So that's why knight f6 attacking this bishop. King takes f6, castle, king moves, and white is just slightly better with the bishop pair and the better pawn structure. Well, it was a blitz game, and because of all these complications, white decided to simplify. They didn't want to fall under a discovered attack of the bishop, so they simply took, which they thought is a good idea, but it's actually not. After queen takes d4, c takes d4, and bishop takes there, the f7 pawn is protected. Maybe black had in mind that they can take it, but unfortunately they cannot. Who can tell me why? Looks like the attack is over, but there is some advantage, some type of the advantage that provided white with a winning position. So what I'm talking about, who can answer this question? So we still castle. We can still castle if we want, but do we want? I want you to realize the key idea. Okay, rook f4, castle, and bishop takes b7. Well, bishop b7 looks attractive. We gain a pawn. That's right, but it's not the key. Castle maybe, but how to play after that? Well, it's hard to come up with it, but actually, because of this special feature, the white's position is completely winning. Yeah, b7 is a free pawn, that's right. However, instead of taking it right now, you can do something else. Okay, and this something else is b3 with this move. That would force the king to get in serious trouble. This bishop pair is much more important. So knight d6, then castle. And after any rook move, it's just this, with the idea of doing this move. So, for example, I don't know, king d7, rook takes f8, rook takes f8. Now, either rook e1 or take on b7 right away. So this pawn is hanging. So how to play a5, let's say. This is still a pin. So, I don't know, rook e1 or bishop a6 or just h3. There are a lot of options. Okay, let's check what John suggests. So bishop f7. Well, sometimes you can realize your bishop pair advantage by exchanging one of the bishops for the knights. So castle, it's a check. King moves, rook f4. Okay, king moves. Yes, rook f4. Yeah, actually, yes, you can do that. But then you are likely to lose this pawn. However, even if you don't lose this pawn, are you sure you win because of the bishops of opposite color? Such endgames have a lot of drawing tendencies. That's why this is what I would definitely play. I would prefer to avoid it and play something with the bishops of the same color. Yeah, just bishop b7 was enough, but you see, bishop a3 is a really nice idea. Something similar happened in the game. d3, castle, d takes e2, and b3. And this is where Ivanchuk resigned. Why did he resign? So this pawn is protected, this move is coming, and they can hardly stop anything. For example, king d6. Okay, king d6, bishop a3 doesn't work. Let's play bishop a4. But bishop a3 can be played on the next move, after which you can play this, gain the exchange, as well as to capture the pawn on c2 for free. And maybe the king is also in the trouble. So that's the end. For example, bishop a3 here wins the game. But Ivanchuk resigned here after b3. It was only 21 move. So what you can learn from these games, let me repeat from the very beginning. Let me sum it up from all three games. So the first game illustrates that if you want to be a successful blitz player and play a kind of Firouzja style, you should definitely understand the openings you play and know the plans that you are going to follow once you develop pieces and the opening stage of the game is over. The second thing is that if you don't know what to do in this concrete position, you can just play waiting moves and consolidate your pieces to be ready for a direct confrontation which happened there. And once you think you are better coordinated or you have a better development, you open the position and then the next plan will be more obvious for you. If you're playing against someone strong, it makes sense to make the position more complicated for both, to provoke your opponent to think and try to find the only moves. You should also create threats even if you see that it's still possible to defend against these threats. So let's say you can even initiate a so-called mosquito bite strategy when you, let's say, make 10 small threats in a row. Well, a grandmaster may defend against all of them, but an average club player will start making mistakes from the threat number 3. So after 3 threats in a row, he'll definitely start making mistakes. A candidate master will make mistakes after the 7th or the 8th threat. So complicate the position for both and create threats, provoking your opponent to make a mistake. That's it. These are 3 secrets of a proper blitz play from me and Alireza Firouzja. Okay, guys, so do you have any questions? Because we are going to finish for today, and we're gonna meet next weekend, next Sunday. Next Sunday, I'm going to conduct a webinar devoted to how to save losing games. Well, I promised this topic last weekend, this weekend, but I didn't prepare enough content, so I'm going to prepare it for the next weekend. I've already did some analysis. Well, now I also have a kind of a request for you, so I need your help. I want to increase the number of spectators at our events. So I want to increase the number of people attending and suggesting the moves. So what do you think? What kind of content should I stream? And what else I can do to increase the number of people joining our events? So if you have any suggestion, please message me at tricksofchess@gmail.com. So I appreciate any help. So you can message me here. Okay, so there is a good point. So that winning losing games is called resourcefulness. Well, I'm not saying about winning losing games. I'm talking about saving. So you can either win or if you draw the losing game, it's also fine. So because, well, winning a losing game is almost impossible at a strong level. For example, I don't remember when I last time won a losing position. I won a slightly worse position, but it wasn't losing. So if you have any suggestions of what can I do to increase the number of people watching this stream and people that are joining our discussion and suggesting the moves, please let me know. I'll definitely appreciate it. Okay, there is a question. Would closed positions, open positions have more complications? Good point. Well, it depends. It can be open position with a lot of lines to calculate. For example, with a lot of pawn exchanges on the board, which you have to calculate, or it can be just a closed position where a direct confrontation can be initiated at any moment. So there is no certain answer which positions are more complicated, open or closed. Usually closed position are, well, more often closed positions are more complicated than open positions, but it depends on the ability to start a direct confrontation among enemy pieces. Okay, so I see that actually 26 people joined my Twitch. How is it possible? I don't understand. Ah, well, I have no ideas, but let me quickly repeat what we were talking about. So at this webinar, I actually conduct webinars every week, every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's 5 p.m. Central European Time. So, and my webinars are devoted to some chess aspects that my students or any subscribers can improve at these events, or something that they can learn in order to improve their ability to play chess. So, and this webinar was devoted to Alireza Firouzja's playing style and his ability to play blitz. So I called it Play Like Alireza Firouzja. We were exploring 3 games. And in all 3 games we could learn something. For example, in the first game we learned that knowing the opening and the plans after really helps with lack of time. And well, you can win because you know what you are doing and your opponent has to spend time on finding a good plan. The second one was about waiting moves and coordinating pieces, which later helped to open the position and take advantage of better coordination. And the third one was about complicated positions. When you play against someone who is stronger than you or somebody of your level, you may keep the position complicated and create threats, trying to provoke your opponent to make a mistake defending against these threats. Okay, guys, thank you. We've finished for today. Any questions? Okay, if not, then see you next weekend, and where we are going to discuss how to save losing games.